Welcome to BiblicalGenderals.com. I've entitled this episode, Are Feelings a Better Basis for Relationships Than the Bible? And this is going to be part of a series of episodes that I'm doing that are linked together, and it's going to be entitled A Defense of Living Biblically. Recently, I wrote an article entitled Why God Wants You to Stay in an Abusive Relationship. And in that article, I gave a lot of hard truths from the scriptures for us as believers, as Christians, on how we are to handle abusive situations. And I talked about certain kinds of situations that we certainly should not stay in, physically abusive ones, things like that. And I talked about many other types of situations that would be abusive, but yet the Bible doesn't allow for us to terminate marriage in those cases. That the Bible only allows for a small number of cases for the termination of marriage because it is such a sacred institution in God's design. So a lot of people really took offense to that article, even among Christians. And there was a blogger, she's not a Christian, Rachel Oates. She's an atheist blogger, and she, was very taken aback by what I wrote. And so she had to, do a video on it, and somebody sent me the link for it. And so I looked it over. My wife watched it, my sons watched it, and my daughter just watched it actually yesterday, and I really felt like that this really gives me a good opportunity to respond and help Christians in general that believe in the Bible, that believe in the family as the Bible states it, and in marriage the way the Bible states it, for us to be able to respond to uh, either liberal Christians who really don't believe the Bible anymore, and there's a lot of Christians out there that don't conduct their lives or their marriages by the Bible anymore, or people that are atheists like Rachel, or people that are non-believers of other religions, that we can share our faith in an intelligent way and uh, give a reason, as the Bible says, for the hope that lies within us. So, with that being said, as an intro here, I just want to get right into her quote here, and this is just each one of these episodes. I'm just going to handle like just a few quotes from her, one or two quotes from her, maybe sometimes three or four. But in this particular episode, I'm just going to do this one quote, and we're gonna really zoom in on this. And I'm not going to get into all the Bible's teachings on marriage. I'm just going to kind of zoom in on a couple of aspects here, and in other episodes, I'll get in on other aspects of the biblical view of marriage. So Rachel states here, an old book, and she's, of course, she's saying this sarcastically, of course, you got to keep that in mind. An old book written over 3,000 years ago is definitely more knowledgeable on your relationship and your feelings than you are. I mean, feelings, what are they? These stupid, girly things. They don't matter in life. So, of course, she means the opposite. She means relationships are hugely important in life, and or feelings are hugely important in life, and they form the basis of your relationship. If the feelings aren't there, there's no relationship. The reason you enter into a relationship is because of feelings. So and she's reflecting her culture and modern society that she's been brought up in. Okay, and so that's what a lot of people think. What Rachel is saying there is what a lot of people think in Western culture, and even among Christians who have just basically left the teachings of the Bible behind. So with that said, let's first compare and contrast. Let's look at what the Bible says. And really, I mean, where I'm hitting in this episode, I'm not getting into super specifics of marriage in the Bible because I'm just trying to show some general principles that these ideas aren't just in the Bible. I mean, that other cultures, not just Christian, but cultures around the world shared these values before the last century or so, okay? Before the dawn of the 20th century. So this is the relationship ideology of what Rachel says, quote unquote, an old book written over 3,000 years ago says, or AKA the Bible. The very first command that God gave to man and woman in the Garden of Eden when he created them, of course, he created Adam first, and then later he created Eve, but he said to them, be fruitful and multiply. This is the very first command. This is the driving force Be fruitful and multiply. And I've talked about that on my blog, and I've shown other passages throughout the scriptures that basically what this is saying is get married, have sex, make babies. That is the prime directive, to use a Star Trek analogy, which is one of my shows that I like. Okay. This is the prime directive God gave to human beings: be fruitful and multiply, get married, have sex, make babies. Okay. And Jeremiah 29:6 again kind of elaborates on the be fruitful and multiply, and really gets into just marriage itself, as far as pushing it. And he says, take ye wives, God says this through the prophet, take ye wives and beget sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons, and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters, that ye may be increased there and not diminished. So relationships before the dawn of the 20th century, primarily, that's not saying that there weren't feelings based ones sprinkled throughout history, okay, but primarily 95%, 98% of relationships were based on a sacred duty to preserve and increase one's people, to preserve your culture, your people, your ethnicity, to keep them going. To it was almost like a source of, in a sense, immortality for your people, okay, but to keep them going. You didn't want to die out. You didn't want your people to die out, your customs to die out, your faith to die out, your ethnicity to die out. You did not want them to die out. So that was a sacred duty. So this principle here is found in other cultures, not even just the Jewish culture or the Christian culture. It's found throughout cultures throughout the entire world. Okay. This was the purpose of marriage. So they would look and say, look at the way we do things today, which I'll get into in the next slide, and they would just be shaking their heads at this. Okay. But this is why prior to the early 20th century, um, families arranged marriages, and or if a man was interested in a woman, he didn't go to her and try and flirt with her and give her some one-liners and everything and try and ask her on a date. He went to her father and he said, hey, I'd like to court your daughter, and I'd like to see about working out maybe marrying her if we agree upon this. So then he would court her daughter for a while, and the family was always present during courting. There were some exceptions, and that's where things got into trouble, that I would talk about later. I'll just give you really quick. They used at a certain point they had an idea of sewing up, and you could see it in the movie The Patriot, Mel Gibson movie, and this really did happen, where some families would let them sew up the guy in a little bag so he couldn't touch the girl, and they let them spend one evening together to just talk alone. But then they realized that a lot of couples were getting out of the bag, having sex, and then she'd sew them back in it. So they realized even that was a mistake. Okay. And some preachers even preached against it. You can find it, them talking about this custom that they didn't like. But for the most part, 90% of the time, couples were not allowed to be alone together until their wedding night. You were not alone with your wife to be until your wedding night. And marriage was about family. It was about people coming together that would make a good match, social wise, financially wise, politically wise, that it would be good for your people, that it would be good for your family, and that it would be good for your people. Okay. It wasn't about, oh, I think Susie's cute and I think Johnny's cute, and oh, he just winked at me or he wrote me a poem. That wasn't what it was about. And but a lot of times these relationships are painted as though they were loveless and everything. And that's the way a lot of people paint it today. And that's wrong. There was romance, there was love, there was passion in marriages, even within that paradigm, even within the courtship. But though the erotic type of love, the passionate type of love grew after you entered into marriage, not before. You didn't, like the Bible talks about, not waking love before it's time in the book of Song of Solomon, okay? That when it was time, when you came together in marriage, then your love for each other grew. Then you cultivated that love towards each other, and the type of feelings-based love. But your marriage wasn't based in that. That was the icing on the cake. That was the benefit of one of the benefits of coming together, but it wasn't the basis for the relationship. The basis for the relationship was the preservation of your people, to increase your people. Okay. Now we know from a biblical perspective, there's more to marriage than just having babies. So if you're hearing this and you go, oh, he's saying marriage is just about having babies. No, it's not. But This was one of the prime reasons for it, one of them, not all of them. We also know as Christians, and I'll talk about it in other videos, that it was also to picture the relationship of God to his people. But that's another part aspect of marriage. This video, I want to really, zoom in on this particular part because it's so important to what we're talking about here with feelings based relationships. So with that being said, that's the old way of thinking, right? That's the one that's worked for thousands and thousands of years for societies. Okay. Well, at the dawn of the early 20th century, we had some bright ideas. We're going to shake it up. We're going to undo thousands and thousands of years of family and marriage ideology. And we're going to say, hey, people don't have to go into relationships to preserve culture, society, or your people. We're gonna go into marriage just because it's fun, because we like the feelings of the giddiness of talking with each other, and it's just and being attracted, and it's so much fun, and it's just it became a game, it became a pleasure, it became marriage. Marriage was a secondary thought, children a secondary thought. Okay, that it became about the individual, not the good of society, not the good of your culture, not the good of your people, your family. And what that didn't matter anymore. Okay. It's all about you. It's all about, what you want to do and how you want to spend your life. Okay. So dating literally did not exist before the early 20th century. It didn't exist. It was, I mean, if it did, it was in such small little spots, and it wasn't even called dating, really. I mean, maybe couples would sneak off to be alone together sometimes, but it wasn't encouraged. It wasn't. It certainly was not the norm in any sense of the word. But as of the early 20th century, with of course the advent of feminism and women's suffrage, then you had dating, and basically you had an entire paradigm shift in male-female relationships. And so dating led to this surge in casual sex outside of marriage and to a corresponding decline in marriage as well, and a surge in children born outside of wedlock. And you can see in this chart here from heritage.org where they show, I mean, you can see it in the early 1900s, like 95% of children were born um, to married parents, mom and dad, married parents, biological parents. And by 2010, only 59% of children are born to married parents. That is a sad testament to what's happened. I mean, this is a result. It's a direct result of feelings-based relationships. So marriage gone down, declined, children being born outside of marriage on the rise. And marriage is not just declining because of dating and casual sex, which are based in feelings-based relationships. But the same feelings-based ideology also brought into these fewer marriages now, because there's less marriages over the century. It brought a higher divorce rate, a higher probability of divorce. Because if your marriage is no longer based on duty, if it's based on your feelings, how you feel about one another, that's a very flimsy foundation for a marriage. It's just it's the way it is. And it's not a coincidence that since marriage is now feelings based, and which of the two is more of a feelings based creature, which human being is more feelings based in most cases? It's the woman, not the man. Men are more duty based. Women are more feelings based. So women, it's not a surprise. Women file for 70% of divorces. The vast majority of divorces are filed by women because they are feelings based. They're making the entire relationship feelings based, and duty is minimal to women. Where men, okay, men, we go into marriage and it's just like, our job. We go to our job. We have our duty to do. It doesn't matter if we don't feel like doing it. We do it. And when we're married, we have a family to support. We have a family to take care of. We have a family to be loyal to, and we may not always like what our wife says or does, or how she treats us, or what's going on with the kids. We may not like it, but we're duty bound. Okay, and that doesn't mean there's not deadbeat dads either. There are, but the stats don't lie. 70% of divorces are filed by women. So you could say the vast majority of the increase in divorce is due to women. Okay? And the marriage being a feelings-based relationship, it's literally put women in the driver's seat of male-female relationships. And that's why we have the crumbling of the family unit and the crumbling of marriage. And as a result of both casual sex, outside of marriage, premarital sex, dating, which has led to premarital sex and casual sex, um, and divorce, those two things together, we have this drastic increase in single parent families. Okay, and this chart here shows, and this is true, you can look it up in other places, that single parent homes, the children that come from single parent homes have an 82% higher chance of being in poverty. If you are married, you have a far less chance. If the child is raised by married a mom and a dad, having their kid together, raising their kids together, they have a significantly less chance of falling into poverty. And also crime, because crime and poverty are usually very linked. So it's also crime as well. That children, and in fact, it's not always poverty. I mean, there's children who've had mommy and daddy issues because mom and dad weren't there because they were divorced and they were going back and forth, that have gotten into criminal things where both parents kind of had some money and they still did. So it's not always that, but the fact is that this destruction of the family unit, this destruction of marriage, which a lot of people today, liberals and secular humanists, it's not a big deal. Not a problem. We're just making a whole new structure here. It's okay, right? Okay, well, we can see it's not. Okay, all of these things are evidence that it's not. That it's not a good thing. So I want to come back to what the Bible says here about feelings, and come back to Rachel's statement about me thinking feelings are stupid. Okay, and I say here that feelings are not stupid, but are part of God's design in us. But we can never allow our feelings to cause us to abandon our commitments or duties. Okay, so God created us as human beings with feelings. We can be happy, we can be sad, we can be angry, we can be, Jesus was in agony here in this passage in Luke 22 that we're going to talk about. Okay, but what we know and what we understand from the Bible is that we cannot allow our feelings to control us, that we must direct and channel our feelings, that if our feelings are going to cause us to do something wrong, that they're going to cause us to abandon our commitments or abandon our duties or do the wrong thing, then we have to control those feelings. We have to say, no, I'm going to do what's right in spite of my feelings. That is a fundamental Christian principle. I am going to continue to do what is right in spite of my feelings. Okay? So if you look here in Luke 22, 41 to 44, it says this, and this is talking about Jesus being in the Garden of Gethsemane, right before he was about to be put on trial and then be crucified and be beaten and crucified. It says here of Christ, and he was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast, and kneeled down and prayed, saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. So Jesus was in agony. I mean, he was experiencing emotions. He wasn't emotionless. Jesus felt the agony of what was going to happen with him on the cross. But the thing is, if we look here, he says, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. In other words, I'm in all this agony. This is bothering me. What's going to happen to me? What is happening to me? But I want to do what you called me to do. I want to do my duty. And if this is my duty to do this, which he knew God called him to do this, he said, if this is my duty and you don't want to take this from me, I'm going to do this, Lord. And I use this in the article to say the same thing for us when we're experiencing abusive situations. This is not a defense. I've had so many people write me, "You're defending abusers, and that's horrible. And how can I am not. When there's a legitimate abuse going on, certain types I talked about in the article, get out, get help, get the police, get people. And in but many other situations, I said, yes, sometimes we have to endure it. Sometimes we have to endure certain things and take it patiently. Sometimes our spouse may mistreat us or just say, nasty things to us, or verbally abuse us in some ways, or just misuse us in certain ways. Okay, but we have to look to Christ as Christians. We have to look to Christ as our example, and that we cannot allow our emotions to say, okay, I'm going to abandon God's institution of marriage for a reason He hasn't allowed me to because of my emotions. No, we have to stay the course. We have to stay committed to our duty and ask God for the strength to endure and to endure it patiently. Okay? So this is not saying here that feelings are bad or feelings are stupid. No, feelings are human. But we must recognize our feelings and we must measure our feelings, okay? And another thing I want to bring up here too toward the end here is while our emotions and our ability to feel is a God-given attribute in humanity, we must realize our hearts have been corrupted by sin. That means our feelings can deceive us into doing the wrong thing, okay? And even though, Rachel as an atheist is not going to believe in the concept of sin probably, or she would define it differently. I mean, she does believe in wrong, but her measurement of what is wrong is going to be different than mine. I'm going to measure what is wrong by the Bible, and she's going to have a set of secular humanist principles by which she measures right and wrong. Okay, but the thing is, as Christians, we believe that the male and the female natures were corrupted from God's original design. That doesn't mean that the fact that we feel happy or sad or attracted to our spouse, or attracted to those opposite sex, that those things aren't corruptions. We are, that's by the design of God. But those feelings can also be corrupted and deceive us. Because it's, like I'm a software developer and I use this analogy all the time, that it's like God wrote this perfect program of, here's the masculine nature, here's the feminine nature. Okay. And yes, they're both human natures. There's an overlap between them, but they are distinct natures, the masculine human nature and the feminine human nature. Okay. But sin in the garden corrupted them both. It's like a virus that got into the program. Okay. Of both the male program and the female program. Okay. So men are most of the time more prone to certain kinds of sins, and women are prone more to certain kinds of sins. Okay, because our programs were corrupted, our programs were poisoned by sin. So we have to be very careful looking at our heart, the things that come out of our heart that could tell us, oh, you should do this or you should do this. That might be wrong. That might be wrong, and we've got to measure that by, as Christians, by our moral standard, our moral measuring stick, which is the Bible. So again, in response to Rachel, no, emotions aren't stupid. Emotions aren't bad. Emotions are part of our human design that God has given us. And we don't even want emotionless marriages. It's not, this isn't what I'm advocating for. A lot of people think that, and I'm not. If you read more of what I write, you will see that's not what I'm advocating for. Okay? I believe that marriages should have all the different types of love. The unconditional type of love, which the Bible calls agape love. That's the duty-based love that comes from the will. It should have philia love, friendship love. It should have eros love, which is the passionate, romantic, sexual kind of love. That marriages should have all those types of love. The best marriages, that is, those things, the eros and the friendship love is the icing on the cake. And who doesn't want a cake that doesn't have frosting on it, right? I mean, we want that. But the cake itself, the basis of marriage, is unconditional love. So, I mean, literally, if you think of a cake and you compare that to marriage, the cake is agape. It's the unconditional love. That is the foundation of marriage. That is what makes marriage, okay, from a biblical perspective. And then the icing, the frosting, and all the other stuff on top of the cake, that's the eros love. That's the friendship love. That's those things that are beautiful and make marriage so much better. But those cannot be the basis for why we go into marriage and why we stay in marriage. Okay. And the culture we're in today and the type of relationships that Rachel pushes and other Christians, even, I mean, Christians, she's not a Christian, but Christians push is that, oh no, the foundation of marriage is philea love, friendship love, and eros love, romantic and sexual love. That's the foundation of marriage. Those, and those are what you make your commitments based on. That doesn't make for a stable relationship. That doesn't make for stable families, and we can see the results of that. So, in conclusion, here, um, I've shown here that feelings-based relationships have led to these things, and I did want to talk about this point one here. You're going to see here. Well, you didn't talk about decreasing fertility rates. I was going to put some slides in for that, but I already had enough slides here. Just Google it. Google what is the fertility rate for the U.S. or what is the fertility rate for the U.K. And you'll see it says 1.8 something. Okay, and you'll say, oh, well, what is that? That means an average of 1.8 persons uh, per man and woman, which is bad. Okay, the fertility rate, and you can read about what fertility rates mean, needs to be a minimum of 2.1 just to keep the population at a normal, like, non-growing level, just to keep it from declining. Okay, it needs to be like 2.3 to have a decent increase. Okay, or to have any kind of an increase. Okay, so thanks to the dating phenomenon coming from out of feminism here, um, and casual sex and then birth control. Okay, so we have less children. Okay, but then at the same time, number two, we have an increase in single parent homes. Okay, and a lot of times, secular humanists and liberals will come at us as Christians and go, "Oh, you don't want people to have abortions, but yet you don't want to pay for social programs for single moms." No, it's not an either or. We want neither. We want people to have many children in marriage. So it's not an either or. We don't want to see single parent homes. Now, yes, it does sometimes happen because of, the dad dies in war or an accident or something. We understand that. We understand things happen or dad has a heart attack. We understand that. But a lot of single parent homes today are not because of those things. It's because of people having sex outside of marriage or because of divorce. And those are both bad things for society. They're bad. So the thing is yeah, we want to see an increase in fertility rates, but the way to do that is through marriage and returning to the values that we get married not just for fun or because, oh, it's enjoyable to have companionship. We get married to increase our people, to sustain our people, our culture, our values, our faith, our ethnicity. That is why we get married. It's not just for fun and giggles. Okay, to use one of the lines from one of the words from Rachel's site. Okay, that's not what it's for. Okay, and numbers 3 and 4 here, feelings-based relationships have led to more poverty and crime because that is directly related to number 2, the single-parent home phenomenon. Single-parent homes, there's a direct connection between kids who are not raised with their mother and their father raising them and them giving in to poverty and crime. Okay, my pastor is a prime example. My pastor was on the path to getting into a lot of trouble. He talks about his life story all the time. His mother was in drugs and sleeping around with different guys, and she just one day, just when he was a young kid, I don't know, 8, and he was just didn't know what's going on, dropped him off, at his grandma's house, grandparents' house to raise him, and he was angry for a lot of years because of that. He didn't know what happened. He's just abandoned. Okay, and then thankfully he found the Lord, and the Lord in faith turned his life around, or else he could have been leading a very different life. Let's just put it that way. And he doesn't even know where he would have been. Okay? But the fact is, a lot of kids don't find that faith, and so they get into poverty. They get into crime. They didn't have that father and that mother giving them that firm foundation. Okay? This is what feelings-based relationships have led to. So the facts show that the duty-based relationship model, which the Bible prescribes, is far superior for the health, stability, and growth of societies than the feelings-based relationship model. It's just a fact. Okay. Now, in the next episode, we're going to get into some other quotes that she talks about with government and different things like that. So, but I hope you've learned some things here and can take some truths here away and be able to be a better witness if you're a Christian to your friends. And I hope that maybe if you're not a Christian hearing this, that maybe this will give you some things to think about. But I'm going to give you a lot more in the next uh, upcoming episodes that when I take on some other statements that Rachel made. But thank you for listening.